All right, I just wanted to quickly thank you guys for checking out and subscribing here to the Terrific Talk podcast. Had a great run of guests lately. If you missed last week's with the New York Post's Mark Berman, we got into a whole lot about his career. We talked some Knicks, Kevin Knox, Summer League dominance, whether Kyrie, KD's coming to New York. We got into a whole lot, and today I've got a fantastic guest. He is the voice of the Boston Celtics, Sean Grande. I've been trying to get him on for a very long time. I'm super happy he was able to make today work. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Terrific Talk starts right now. Terrific Talk Podcast. Welcome back, Terrific Talk Podcast.
Here comes the host.
I'm your host, Tom Anderson.
First, behind the back, it gets to Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Knicks win it.
Welcome to Terrific Talk. I'm Tom Anderson. Stormy day here from the Hoboken Studios in New Jersey. I think it's supposed to storm here for like the next 30 days. Not really sure what's going on. I got to move this week. It's going to be bad. But the storms are not stopping us from keeping the podcast going here on the CLNS Media Network. I've got a great guest today. Sean Grande is the voice of the Boston Celtics. It's an honor to have him on today. Let me bring him in here. Sean, welcome to Terrific Talk.
I've got Mets tickets on Wednesday. So make sure the rain, whatever's happening in Hoboken and in New York over the next few days, I've got these cool seats for my son on Wednesday. It's one of those games that you can't really replace, so it's like I just need that one day of good weather, and I'm good.
Who's the next Met player to get injured? Are they going to slip on the slick surface?
It's such an awful. There's things that you don't. Now that I'm a parent of a child who's lived his whole life in Boston, and he has some interest in the Mets because the Mets were my life in my childhood. If it happened, in between like the late 70s and 1991, and I saw it happen with him. Like the Mets were my childhood.
Yeah.
So he's sort of a little attached. He's obviously roots for the Red Sox, and I took him to Wrigley a couple of weeks ago, so now he's kind of watching the Cubs. But I don't think I want to inflict this Mets fan thing on him. It just seems like some sort of curse of plagues and snakes and foot and mouth disease. I mean, if anyone do we know if David Wright is still alive?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You can't make it up. I still don't forgive my dad for passing that one on to me. It's
the
messed
thing
up.
is, I didn't have it. It wasn't passed on to me. My father he was a sports fan, but he wasn't like a sports nut, so we didn't really have a team. So when you're a kid in New York, if you don't have a parental influence, you are sort of on your own to choose. And a funny thing just happened. My son, who's now 6.5, he's interested in teams and logos, and one of the things he got from somebody for Christmas was all these old baseball cards. And by old baseball cards, I mean like the late 80s, early 90s stuff that they overproduced it. So now you can, like when we were kids, cards from 30 years ago were really expensive and valuable. Now cards from 30 years ago are just, whatever. So he saw the Expos.
Oh, wow.
He loved the logo and the hat and whatever. And what's amazing is genetics or a fluke of whatever. That was the first logo I loved when I was like 5. And the reason I became a Mets fan was because the Expos were in the National League. And I liked the National League uniforms better. And so in 1976 or 77 or whenever I was 5, I became a Mets fan, which is the worst possible time to become a Mets fan because the Mets, who's this great player? We have Tom Seaver. He'll be my favorite player when I'm 5. And then he gets traded, and the Mets were terrible, and all my friends were Yankee fans, and the Yankees won in 77 and 78, and they went to the World Series. And so I don't think I want to inflict that on him. It's bad enough. The Ranger thing was bad enough until they won until they won in '94. That was torture.
It's brutal.
I have to do a show. I'm doing a boxing on PBC on Fox at Nassau Coliseum.
Oh wow!
In 2 weeks. I don't want to go in. I don't want to see those banners.
You can't go in there. Yeah.
Hanging. That's torture.
It's enemy territory. Enemy territory.
Yeah.
At a young age for you, I knew you grew up sitting in front of the TV, holding a fake microphone, pretending to be the play-by-play guy. What drew you to this?
I'm not really sure what drew me to it. I know there's sort of a famous story, I believe, that somewhere there exists an audio tape my mother has buried somewhere of me being called to Thanksgiving dinner when I was 5 or 6. When I was and it's like, Mom, I'm doing I try to figure out what game it is. By going back and tracing Football Reference, I thought it was like the Giants playing the Lions on Thanksgiving Day or whatever it was. I don't remember. But I had great plans my career plan was actually very definitive, which is unusual for a kid, but I was going to be the second baseman for the Mets.
Ooh.
And somewhere along the way, when you grow up in Manhattan, there's athletically you've got a problem, which is that your knees are done from the concrete by the time you're 11. You have to have like a Bobby Orr retirement speech because your knees have been completely torn up. And there just really isn't a place to play. You can't play baseball. You have to play softball. There's no, so eventually most athletic dreams when you grow up in Manhattan or, in New York City, for the most part tend to fade away. So how do I get to the major leagues was the question. And that seemed to be the way that interested me the most and the way I had the most probably ability or interest, and that became from the minute I couldn't hit pony league pitching anymore. That was the path.
It's a good backup plan.
Yeah.
Preparation, obviously, everything for a job like yours. Can you just maybe give us an example of what how your preparation process is like? Say it's like a Tuesday and the Celtics are home for the Lakers. What's your process like preparing to call that game?
Well, in the beauty of it, every sport is different. If you're doing it on TV or radio, it's different. So every level of preparation is different. But the one rule applies to everything, which is that you cannot call a good game, a good fight, a good show. You can't do it if you are not properly prepared. If you are extraordinarily prepared, it is virtually impossible to have a bad game or a bad show or whatever it is you're doing. I think the NBA, there's sort of this cumulative thing. If you're covering a team, you are probably spending the night before focusing on, you've probably already updated your Celtics. Let's say the Celtics played Monday. Let's say they played Monday at home and they've got a Wednesday home game. My game night continues. I come home and then I do 30, 40 minutes of stat work and chart work, getting the Celtic stuff ready for the next game. And then depending on when the other team played. Yeah. And if the other team had played that night, I'll start diving into them, seeing who played. I'll watch the game. It's so much different now. When I was literally first starting, when I was in college and doing college hockey games in the early 90s, there wasn't, you couldn't watch video. You couldn't watch, there's no internet. It was virtually impossible. It was really difficult to look. You're studying rosters and trying to remember the names and the numbers. There's no, video is everything. And now everything is just readily available, and I've got my iPad, and I can watch the Laker game that night whenever I want to watch it. Mm-hmm. And stats are updated almost immediately. So, you're putting charts together, and generally speaking, you can usually get that done. You're sort of ready for back-to-back games anyway, which happen not as often as they used to, but certainly happen a lot. But I don't know if I'm a late-night creature because of my job, or I have this job because I'm a late-night creature. As anyone that's listened to Max and I for years knows, he loves the day games. He loves those early 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock games. Right. He's in a great mood. He's got the rest of the day, and I am miserable.
It's too early.
My kryptonite, and I often, I joke with people that, given the track and given the way things go in the NBA and the number of years I've been doing, there's a reasonable chance. Like I could literally end up in the Hall of Fame. If every game started at 1 o'clock, I would be unemployable. I can't do it. My standard joke is that airline pilots, drug dealers, and us were the only ones whose job starts 8 hours earlier the next day than it did the day before. It's very,
It's good.
If you're a prep, all the stuff you're asking me about, if you're a prep person, when suddenly your game starts at noon instead of 7:30, that's 7.5 hours less of prep time that you have.
Yeah.
And things that happen in the league. Games end in the league at 1 a.m. And then you've got to quickly turn everything. It's just, we're all about routine. Routine is when you don't have a Monday to Friday job, when you don't have a 9-to-5 job or have the regular hours and you have a crazy life like we have, you cling desperately to routine. And when it gets broken up by playing at 1 o'clock, Brad's another one of those guys. He's just this happy person. He's just even happier in the morning. And when those coaching shows come on at 11 a.m., I'm just miserable doing it with him. And he's all happy like a regular person would be. But prep is it's very different. I've got fights coming up. I think we're 12 days out now. So I've watched a few fights of the key guys I'm going to have, and that will gear up. And you'll have if you're doing a show like it's boxing or it's MMA. You generally have a production meeting on Monday or Tuesday if it's a Friday or Saturday show. and you're formatting a television show. So every element is based on preparation, but the preparation is very different depending on what you're doing. When the year I did baseball, that's a completely different animal because your prep, it's almost on the fly. Like everything is, it's cumulative. Stuff you're doing during a game is actually going to benefit you the next day. Just being around the ballpark all day. That's a lifestyle job, which I learned. It took me a while to figure that out, but baseball's a completely different animal.
I'm excited to look out for you for some day games now. I want to be like, oh, he's miserable. He's miserable.
Don't ignore those. That's why I need John Wallach. That's why I need that understudy.
There you go.
At this performance, the role of, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5, great. But noon,
It's pushing it.
It just messes up the day, and it just exacerbates it when Max is in such a good mood.
Right, makes it worse.
And it makes it even worse. Because if, let's say, people are always like amazed by this, and when my son was very young, obviously when he was a baby, this kind of changed it. But until that time, I went maybe 15 years without ever having gone to bed before 3 in the morning.
Wow.
Like my first, just because that's the life. My job, I get home from work often at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
My job just happened to be in Charlotte that night. But I get home at 2 a.m. And when you get home, that's why sleep science is a very big thing right now in the NBA. It's completely changed the way we do our jobs. It's changed the way we travel. We very often stay now in the city instead of flying late at night because there's a lot of science about that. And when you get home, when you walk in the door at 2:30 in the morning, you don't walk in the door, turn the key, and then just throw your head on the pillow.
Yeah.
Because you just traveled across. You're trying to wind down, and
right.
So it doesn't really work. And sometimes you often have a game. The worst, those, back-to-backs are always tough, and the home road you get a lot. Road home is almost worse because you're getting home and you got to turn around and have your regular day the next day. And so the point being that if you go to bed at 3 a.m. every night, and then suddenly you have a noon game, that completely changes your.
Crazy.
If you need a certain amount of time, you do things on the day of a game to get ready for the game, writing the coach's show, updating all the league stats, reading about things that happened that day. You have to do the exact same amount of work. You just have 7-8 hours less to do it.
Right. I got to ask you, everybody here in New York right now is somehow convinced Kyrie Irving is going to leave the Celtics next summer, sign a max contract with the Knicks. I'm not in that camp. I think the Celtics are going to be really good. They can offer him the most money. I think it'll be tough for him to leave. But a lot can happen in a year. What do you think? What's the mood like in Boston and Kyrie right now?
I think that it's going to be a thing all year. And I think the league is sort of designed that way. And while it is not necessarily a good thing for continuity in teams, it's interest in the league, which the one thing the NBA has certainly mastered over the last few years is controlling the news cycle.
Right.
Year-round and being a year-round league. I think this is the way it was set up. I don't think, if you ask Kyrie Irving today, I don't think he's given it much thought because why would you? There was no reason for him to sign an extension. You play this stuff out. I think what we have to do is start conditioning fans to not worry about this stuff during the year, particularly if you're a Celtics fan. Do you want to spend this year, which could be a very special year, and it should be, with the talent you have and everybody playing together, and it might not be, and that could make it much worse. One of the things the Celtics will deal with this year is expectations, which they haven't really had to deal with before. But listen, does Kyrie Irving want to play with Jimmy Butler? Are there agents and friends and things that qualify by the thinnest of margins of sources, particularly in an age where sources don't really matter that much anymore? Are you going to see things on the internet all year long? Of course you are. Does the Knicks, the fact that it's New York and there's such desperation for the Knicks to be relevant again, which, by the way, I'm at the top of the list of people that want to see that because it's good for the league. It's good for everybody when the Knicks are good. But it's going to be a rough go. I'm a huge David Fizdale fan. I have some concerns about David Fizdale brushing up against that New York media every day, particularly if they are struggling, which they probably will.
Oh, yeah?
Without Porzingis. I don't think he does not suffer fools well, which makes him a dangerous candidate in some ways for New York in the way that could go. All that said, it's New York, so there needs to be stories about what is going to make the Knicks good again, and I think Kyrie Irving and Jimmy Butler and Anthony Davis and everybody is going to be there's going to be stories about all of them because the Knicks at least are finally going to be in a position to make some free agent noise in 2019.
You said it's going to be really probably a special year for this Boston Celtics team, bringing basically everybody back. You got Gordon Hayward back. Do you think Boston's the team to beat in the East?
Yeah, I think Toronto is awfully good. If Kawhi, if you're getting the Kawhi from 2 years ago, there's a lot of conversation about the Celtics and Kawhi Leonard, and just being the reasons to add a Kawhi Leonard if you're Toronto or Boston or whoever are obvious. But just to be for argument's sake, what I would point out from a Boston standpoint was there was a lot of position replication when you already have Hayward and Brown and Tatum and all these guys. Like, where do the minutes go? But the other issue, people would say, hey, Kawhi Leonard was one of the top 5 players in the NBA 2 years ago, and he was.
Yeah.
So was Isaiah Thomas.
There you go.
So, let's not get crazy. And I think it's only fair to point out that Kawhi Leonard just took a walk on the gold standard coach and franchise in the NBA. So I think there are legitimate questions about it. That said, Kawhi Leonard from 2 years ago is a more valuable player than DeMar DeRozan, as good as DeRozan is. So you have a 59-win team that, in theory, on paper, whatever that's worth, got better. So to me, there's no reason that that Toronto team can't stay with the Celtics. The Celtics had a lead with 5 minutes to go in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals without Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving, and now they have them. So how do you not call them the team to beat? That said, Toronto's going to be good. Indiana's going to be good. Be interesting to see if Washington can kind of jump back into relevance. Obviously, Philadelphia is going to be there, but I've always been resistant to the whole East versus West disparity thing. I think it's always been overplayed. I'm not sure it's overplayed right now. Like it's pretty dramatic now when you realize when you get to 5, 6, 7 in the conference. It's significant. So the Celtics should be the team to beat in the East, but man, my thing is I hope people enjoy. If the Celtics are a 60-win team, let's enjoy it. If you can't enjoy that year the Celtics had last year, then you're not having enough fun in show business.
Amazing year for them. And you mentioned Isaiah with that incredible season he had 2 years ago. Woj just came out with a report. He talked to Thomas. He said he reached out to Danny Ainge and the Celtics. They spoke about a potential reunion. Were you surprised by that at all?
No, because Isaiah here was – there are players who became a part of the fabric of Boston. Obviously, all the Patriots, and Tom Brady and David Ortiz and, heroes. Yeah. It took them a lot longer than it took Isaiah. Isaiah and Boston was the perfect match at that time. Now, is Isaiah ready to be, and we'll ask the same question about Carmelo Anthony right now, you're ready to be a sixth man, which is your role right now. The funny thing is what the Celtics need, probably, what they certainly needed last year, was a scorer off the bench. Yeah. To be the go-to scoring guy on the second unit. Isaiah kind of fits that role. I don't know the decision-making process yet that led the Celtics to kind of go a different way. And I think, by the way, I got kind of jumped at by some people, friends who, when I said, hey, this is a great spot for Isaiah to go to Denver. And they said, good spot. He was backing up the Brinks truck, and now he's making the veteran. I said, all right, forget the money for a second. I'm saying he's in a great spot now to get his minutes, which he will get a ton of from Mike Malone, who was first. Anyone that thinks they were early on the Isaiah bandwagon, nobody was earlier than Mike Malone. Right. Okay. He was on the Isaiah bandwagon from the start, and he's going to give Isaiah minutes, and he's going to get his numbers up, and he's going to get his dollars up, and he's going to get a good deal from somebody, maybe even Denver again, come the end of next year. So I don't really worry about that. I think Boston would have been an interesting fit. The question is, would he have been? The Celtics had a situation here in Danny Ainge's first year where Antoine Walker was a bigger fixture in the franchise and the city than he was a player in terms of his value. Right. And that sometimes can become a problem. And, would Isaiah, is he almost too big to play the small role that he would have to play on the Celtics?
Yeah, he was the star. It would be tough to be coming off the bench on that same team. Obviously a different team, but that would have been tough.
But that was the Boston Isaiah Thomas love affair was very legitimate on both sides. And they were, they came to each other at a time. Isaiah, what was Isaiah Thomas before he came to Boston?
Yeah.
It was the definition of a symbiotic, relationship.
Right.
The Celtics needed someone to be a star player, and he was, and played the heart on his sleeve, and the city fell in love with him, and he lived in the city, and it couldn't have gone any better on both. On both sides. I remember being a little disappointed in Isaiah after the fact when he was sort of implying that all he did for the Celtics and coming back to play in the playoffs and things like that. When, number one, like I said, it was the Celtics who gave him the opportunity to be a star, treated him like a star, catered the entire team around him to the point where, if you don't realize the Celtics in 2017 catered their team and completely played around Isaiah, you point out the following. The Celtics were 10th in defense in 2017. Lost Avery Bradley, who you can find many players in the NBA who will tell you he is the best one-on-one defender in the league.
Yeah.
Lost Avery Bradley and Jay Crowder, a very good defensive player. And they leave, and the Celtics go from 10th to 1st in the NBA
Amazing.
in defense. It's not hard to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's about Isaiah. And
they were hiding him all year.
Had to do. That's it. It was the perfect relationship. And Isaiah played in the playoffs through his awful family tragedy and through his injury, because that's what Isaiah does. He plays. And he was, it wasn't the Celtics who were making him play. It was the Celtics were saying, take as much time as you want. And he was like, no, I got to play. So it was one of the most amazing things I've gotten to call in 20 years in the league and 25 years of doing this craziness is Isaiah's year in 2017. It was amazing.
Amazing. Sean, this was great. Thank you for taking the time today. Everybody check out Sean on Twitter. His handle is @SeanGrande, PBP. Sean, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.